You trust a bank with your money because you believe it'll be there. But what if they change the rules? 80 feet below the sidewalks of New York City lies the largest vault on the planet, locked inside, the gold of dozens of nations, wealth that no one has laid eyes on in decades. But when one government grew tired of waiting and asked for their gold back, the answer they received set off a red alert. Treaties dissolved in secret, promises shattered on live television, and a system held together by nothing but faith. Because if the gold belongs to your country, why do you need permission to touch it? Frankfurt, January 2014. An armored truck rolls through the gates of the Bundesbank under armed escort. No journalists, no cameras, no ceremony. Inside, something that had survived wars, financial crises, and nearly a century of history was finally coming home. German gold, repatriated from New York after decades stored 80 feet below the streets of Manhattan. The operation was supposed to be simple: retrieve, transport, store. But days later, a German central bank official opened a routine technical report and found a sentence he couldn't get out of his head. The bars were melted down and reissued. He read it again, then once more. Melted down. The words sounded technical, bureaucratic, harmless, but they carried a question he couldn't answer. If those bars had been sitting in a vault for decades, why did they need to be melted and recast before coming back? The weight was the same. The purity was the same. The financial value was the same. But those were no longer the same bars. Every gold bar has an identity, a serial number, an origin, a history, a documented chain of custody. When a bar goes into a furnace, the metal survives. The identity doesn't. And it was that seemingly technical detail that turned a routine logistics operation into one of the most heated debates in recent financial history. A debate that kept circling back to a question no government wanted to answer out loud. When was the last time anyone actually checked what was down there? To understand why this story matters, and why it goes far beyond German gold, we need to go down into that vault, and then travel back to the moment the world decided to put its wealth there in the first place. If you walked through Lower Manhattan today, you wouldn't notice anything unusual. Tourists snapping photos of historic buildings, executives crossing the street staring at their phones, delivery workers rushing past, packed coffee shops, a noisy subway, the normal rhythm of the city. But beneath those sidewalks, deep underground, sits one of the most extraordinary concentrations of sovereign wealth ever created. The Federal Reserve Gold Vault, located inside the New York Federal Reserve Bank headquarters on Liberty Street, is not an urban legend. It's a real structure, built directly on Manhattan's bedrock, a formation of schist that has supported the island for hundreds of millions of years. That was the logic of the engineers who designed it in the 1920s. Nothing built by human hands would be more stable than the rock the entire city rests on. If the world collapsed above, the floor below wouldn't move. Getting to the vault requires an elevator ride down, a walk through corridors with multiple checkpoints and layered identity verification. One of the entrance doors weighs 90 tons and pivots with such precision that a single staff member can move it by hand. When sealed, it locks the chamber completely airtight. With every floor you descend, the sounds of the city fade. What's left is concrete, hardened steel, and silence. Inside, the space is divided into individual compartments, 122 of them, belonging to dozens of countries and international organizations. Each government holds exclusive legal ownership over the metal stored in its section. The Federal Reserve owns none of it. It's the custodian, a guardian of the sovereign wealth of entire nations, and it charges a modest fee for the service, currently around $1.75 per bar per year. The most staggering fact isn't the size of the vault. It's the sheer amount of metal concentrated in a single location. At its peak, the vault held approximately 12,000 metric tons of gold, roughly 1/4 of all the gold ever mined in human history up to that point, stored beneath a single street in New York City. The most revealing detail about how this system works is its near-invisible efficiency. A gold transfer between two countries could happen without a single bar ever leaving the building. All it took was moving a few bars from one compartment to another and updating the records. No ships, no planes, no international escorts crossing oceans. Transactions worth billions in sovereign wealth settled with a short walk down an underground hallway. That efficiency was no accident. It was the product of an agreement built decades earlier, at a moment when the world was desperately trying to rebuild something that had been destroyed twice in less than 30 years. The summer of 1944 was not an obvious moment to plan for the future. World War II wasn't over. European cities were in ruins. Millions of people didn't know where their next meal was coming from. Fighting continued in the Pacific. The end of the war was foreseeable. The date was not. And yet representatives from 44 countries gathered at a mountain resort in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to tackle a question they considered more urgent than the war itself. How do you prevent the world from collapsing financially all over again? The question had a painful historical answer behind it. During the 1930s, in the wake of the Great Depression, countries around the world turned inward, devaluing their currencies, raising tariffs, closing off their markets. Each one tried to protect its own economy at the expense of its neighbors, and the result was a spiral of mutual distrust that fed directly into the tensions that led to war. Wars don't start only with armies. More often than not, they start when the system connecting nations breaks down. At Bretton Woods, the solution had an elegant logic. Instead of every country physically moving gold for every international transaction, they would use dollars. And those dollars would be accepted because there was a concrete promise behind them. Every dollar in circulation represented a fixed amount of gold held in the United States, $35 per troy ounce. Any central bank in the world could, at any time, present its dollars and receive the metal in return. The Americans were the natural choice to anchor the system. While Europe emerged from the war with destroyed infrastructure and shattered economies, the United States came out as the world's dominant industrial power. Its gold reserves represented roughly 2/3 of all monetary gold in the Western world. The dollar was already widely used in international trade. The logic was hard to argue with. But the system created a practical consequence that few fully anticipated. If the dollar was the global reserve currency, and the gold backing it was held in the US, it made geographic and logistical sense for other countries' gold to stay in the US as well. Shipping reserves across continents was expensive, slow, and risky. Ships could sink, conflicts could erupt, routes could be cut off. Keeping everything in one place was simply more efficient and safer. And so, almost without the public noticing, ton after ton of sovereign gold began crossing oceans toward New York. From war-ravaged Europe, desperate for dollars to rebuild. From Latin America, integrated into the American financial system. From Asia, from governments with completely different political systems, all of them making essentially the same decision. Trust. The system expanded through the 1950s. International trade grew. European countries recovered. Reconstruction moved forward. And the gold kept arriving in Manhattan. Each new shipment seemed to confirm the arrangement worked. Each frictionless transaction reinforced confidence in the infrastructure. The vault beneath Liberty Street was quietly becoming one of the most important anchors in the global financial architecture, until a French general started asking uncomfortable questions. Charles de Gaulle had watched empires fall. He had governed a country in exile while another French general collaborated with the Nazi occupier. He had led a resistance movement when the rest of the world had written France off as defeated. By both training and temperament, he was deeply suspicious of promises that depended on someone else's goodwill to be kept. In the 1960s, while the Bretton Woods system appeared to be running smoothly, de Gaulle and his economic advisor Jacques Reff began noticing something few wanted to discuss openly. The number of dollars circulating around the world was growing far faster than the gold reserves available to back them. Throughout the 1950s and into the early 1960s, the United States had been spending heavily on the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe, on the Korean War, on military bases scattered across the globe, on the early years of the space race. Dollars were flowing out of the country in growing volumes. American gold reserves were shrinking, and the promise to convert dollars into gold remained formally in place. De Gaulle didn't write a paper about it. He ran an experiment. Instead of continuing to accumulate dollars, France would start exercising exactly the right that the system itself guaranteed, converting part of its dollar reserves into physical gold. No rule breaking, no violations, just using the mechanism precisely as it had been designed. At a press conference in February 1965, de Gaulle was blunt. The current system gave the United States an exorbitant privilege, the ability to pay its international debts with paper it printed itself. No other country had that power, and he saw no reason for France to keep financing that privilege indefinitely. That same year, French ships began carrying gold shipments back to Europe. Bars left New York, others left London. France was turning paper into metal, shipment by shipment, at a steady pace that caught the attention of markets and irritated Washington. The implicit message was more powerful than any speech. If a promise is solid, it should hold up to verification, and if it doesn't, better to find out now. For a while, the system held. French requests were honored, transfers went through, bars arrived at their destination. But each shipment crossing the Atlantic made more visible attention the system had carried from the start. It had been built on the assumption that most countries would trust the promise, not that everyone would demand proof at the same time. And if other countries followed France's lead, which some quietly began to do, American gold simply would not be enough to cover all the dollars in circulation. The answer would come 6 years later, on a Sunday night, in a way nobody saw coming. August 15th, 1971. A Sunday night. Most Americans were wrapping up their weekend. Richard Nixon broke into regular television programming with an address that lasted about 15 minutes. There had been no prior international negotiation, no formal consultation with the system's partners, no warning to foreign central banks. The decision was entirely unilateral. Effective immediately, the United States was suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Foreign central banks could no longer exchange their dollars for physical metal. The promise that had organized global finances for nearly 30 years was ended by presidential decree, in a television broadcast, on a Sunday night. For most people, the news felt distant and technical. For the governments that had built their entire monetary policy around that promise, it was a profound shock. For the countries that had gold stored in the US, one question came up immediately. Now what? The Bretton Woods system was over. What remained was called the non-system by economists, a floating exchange rate regime with no formal anchor, where the value of currencies would now be set by markets rather than fixed agreements. And then something happened that surprises anyone who looks back at this moment with historical distance. The chaos everyone expected never came. Trade continued. Countries kept accumulating reserves. Financial markets adapted. And the Federal Reserve Gold Vault kept operating exactly as before. Same compartments, same bars, same records. The formal system was gone. The infrastructure remained untouched. New York was still the financial capital of the world. The vault was still one of the most secure locations on the planet. Moving gold between countries was still more practical there than anywhere else. So the metal stayed. Out of inertia, out of convenience, out of the absence of a better alternative, or simply because changing something that had never caused a visible problem didn't feel urgent. Governments changed, presidents came and went, the world lived through the oil crisis, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the birth of the euro. A new generation of central bankers and finance ministers took office without ever having laid eyes on those bars. Trust in the custody system remained a given, a truth that never needed to be reaffirmed because it had never been questioned. So solid that nobody asked the most obvious question: when was the last time anyone actually checked? In September 2008, the investment bank Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. It was the largest bank collapse in American history, and the shock that followed revealed that the global financial system was interconnected in ways that few had fully mapped. Banks that looked solid vanished in days. Credit markets froze. Wealthy governments had to bail out private institutions with taxpayer money to prevent a cascade of failures. The 2008 crisis destroyed something beyond financial wealth. It destroyed the assumption that institutions too big to fail were also too established to question. Suddenly, questions that had sounded paranoid began to sound reasonable. Where exactly are the assets? Who really controls access? What happens if we need to retrieve this right now? In Germany, those questions reached the Federal Court of Auditors, the government body responsible for auditing the German state's finances. When they examined the Bundesbank's gold reserves held abroad, which at the time totaled around 3,400 metric tons, making Germany the second largest gold holder in the world behind only the United States, the auditors found something that raised eyebrows. In decades, the Bundesbank had never conducted a full independent physical inspection of the bars stored outside Germany. There were paper records, certificates, and formal confirmations from the Federal Reserve and other custodians. But a direct physical inspection, with German officials checking bar by bar, it had never happened systematically. In 2012, the Bundesbank published a report acknowledging that its reserves at the Federal Reserve had never been independently physically inspected. The document was technical and measured in tone, but the public impact was immediate. The story broke out of specialized circles and reached a general audience. If that gold belonged to Germany, why was it so hard to simply see it? The answer the Bundesbank received, as widely reported at the time, was that Fed procedures did not allow depositor countries to conduct independent physical inspections of their reserves. The guarantee was documentary. The custodian assured the integrity of the holdings through its own internal audit processes and certifications, not through outside inspections. To some, that was entirely reasonable. The Federal Reserve is one of the most audited institutions on the planet, with rigorous internal processes and decades of reputation behind it. To others, the logic was circular. The proof that the gold was there was the fact that the institution holding it said it was there. The debate picked up fast. Members of parliament asked pointed questions during Bundestag sessions. Newspapers ran investigative pieces. Opposition parties demanded answers. The public pressure was enough for the Bundesbank to announce in 2013 a formal repatriation plan. 674 metric tons would be brought back to Frankfurt by 2020, 300 tons from New York, and 374 tons from Paris, where France had agreed to store German reserves since the post-war period. It seemed straightforward. After all, the gold was German. The operation was carried out in stages over several years. Logistical plans were drawn up with military-level secrecy, transport routes kept confidential, insurers brought in to cover shipments worth billions of dollars. The process was complex and expensive, but it worked. The bars arrived in Frankfurt, and that's when it appeared, in a routine technical report, the sentence that had stopped that official in his tracks at the beginning of this story. The bars were melted down and reissued. The Bundesbank's official explanation was straightforward. Some of the older bars did not meet current international gold market standards, known as London Good Delivery Standards, which set precise requirements for weight, shape, purity, and markings. So part of the original bars were melted down and recast in a contemporary format, a technical procedure with no impact on the quantity or quality of the metal. That makes sense. Standards change over decades. A bar cast in the 1950s may not carry the markings today's markets require, but the problem wasn't financial. It was about traceability. Every original bar carried a serial number and a documented history. Some had markings from governments that no longer exist, from dissolved banks, from specific moments in European history. When one of those bars goes into a furnace, the metal survives. The history doesn't. And without that history, there is no way to compare the bars that arrived with the bars that were deposited decades earlier. For critics, that was the part that didn't add up. Even without any evidence of wrongdoing, the remelting made independent historical verification impossible. The only guarantee available was still the word of whoever had been holding the gold, which, they argued, was exactly the problem that a physical inspection was supposed to solve. The Bundesbank held its position: correct weight, correct purity, documentation in order. The reserves were intact, the operation completed ahead of schedule. But the doubt didn't go away, not for lack of explanation, because when trust starts to be questioned, documents aren't enough. What people want is to be able to verify things themselves, without having to ask permission to do it. The German repatriation was completed. The targets were met, the timeline was honored, and the gold came back to Frankfurt. The Federal Reserve remained one of the world's leading gold custody centers. Large quantities of metal belonging to dozens of countries are still stored beneath Manhattan today. But the debate that emerged from that process changed something permanently. In the years that followed, other countries reassessed their strategies. The Netherlands brought 122 metric tons back from New York. Austria repatriated part of its reserves from London. Venezuela had done the same years earlier under Chavez. Others left everything where it was, and there were practical reasons for that. Keeping gold in New York offers liquidity and access to markets that a vault in Brasilia, Vienna, or Caracas simply cannot match. What changed was not confidence in the Federal Reserve. What changed was the question governments started asking. Instead of, "Is this place safe?" the question became, "Does it make sense to have everything in one place?" That's basic risk management. The same logic any investor applies when spreading resources across different assets. The less dependent you are on a single point of access, the less exposure you have to any unexpected scenario, including the ones that seem impossible today. After all, nobody woke up that Sunday morning in August 1971 expecting the President of the United States to end decades of international monetary policy in 15 minutes of television. And this is where the story stops being about gold. Ownership and custody are not the same thing. You can possess something and depend entirely on someone else to access it. That applies to sovereign gold reserves, but it also applies to money in a bank, investments held by a brokerage, real estate with complicated title records, digital accounts. The question is not whether the custodian is trustworthy. The question is what happens when you need to verify. And the verification depends on the cooperation of the very party you are trying to verify. Trust remains one of the most powerful forces in the global economy. Without it, trade stops, markets break down, and contracts lose their meaning. Trillions of dollars move every single day because people, businesses, and governments trust institutions they have never visited and processes they have never audited. That trust isn't naive. It's functional. The world couldn't operate any other way. But trust that cannot be verified is not a solid foundation. It's a bet. And bets, by definition, can be lost. The vault beneath Manhattan still exists. The gold is still there. The 90-ton door still pivots with the same mechanical precision it had when engineers installed it 100 years ago. And the question a German official asked himself while rereading a technical report on an afternoon in 2014 is still unanswered. If something belongs to you, but it's being held by another institution, what actually guarantees your access to it when you need it? Not in a normal situation, when everything runs the way it always has. In a situation where the rules change. If you were responsible for a country's reserves, would you keep the gold in New York, or would you bring it back home? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy real stories like this one, stories that show how decisions made decades ago still shape the world we live in today, make sure to subscribe. See you in the next one.